Hello, welcome back. This video is my October wrap-up where I'm just going to be giving some of my thoughts about the books I read this month. I didn't have a super productive reading month. I don't know about how your month went, but I just had so many important deadlines to do for work, and I felt like I was doing things on the weekend a lot, so I didn't have a lot of downtime to read, but I still read 7 books. So in the grand scheme of things, that's still a lot of books. I did read a range, some that I really did not like and some that I really did, so it should be a fun chat today. Because I didn't read as many, I figured instead of going by genre, I would go by rating. So starting with the books I liked the least and ending with on a high note, you know, with the book I really loved. So let's get started. The first book I'm going to talk about, it kills me to say this, but it was Stirring the Plot by Daryl Wood Gerber. This was the cozy mystery that I started reading in one of my reading vlogs. It was also the video in which I'm like, cozies are great, read a cozy mystery. And of course, the cozy mystery is the book I liked the least this month. In case you didn't watch that video, or you just need a refresher, this book is about Jenna Hart. She's our amateur sleuth who lives in the city of Crystal Cove, California. During Halloween, a woman who's in charge of the Winsome Witches, which is just like a charity group of women, dies, and her aunt, or Jenna's aunt, becomes one of the prime suspects. In order to try to clear her name, Jenna does some digging and tries to put the clues together. The premise was decent, it's just I hated Jenna. I thought she was incredibly annoying. I thought she was hypocritical. For example, she got really mad at the sheriff and was like, you're accusing all of your friends and people that you've known all your life. How could you do that? And then 2 pages later, she literally does the exact same thing. And worse, she does it in such an outlandish way. The theories that she comes up with, it's like, woman, you've been watching way too much late night TV. Just calm your jets. I did not enjoy it. I also thought for a book that's like, so Jenna owns a cookbook shop, which is why this is part of a cookbook Nook mystery. Its depictions of food were just plain offensive. The one meal that she cooks is a plain chicken breast. She doesn't even talk about the seasoning. It was just a chicken breast going in oil in a pan, and that just crossed a line to me. You know, if you're going to self-proclaim that you're a cookbook fanatic, at least give us some good food porn. So while I hate to say it, Stirring the Plot did not stir my interest, and I gave it a 1 star. Don't read this one, but do read cozy mysteries. The next book I read that I didn't love, but I also didn't hate as much as that, was I Know You by Claire McGowan. This was an ARC that I received earlier in the month. It is a mystery domestic thriller. I also talked about it in a vlog, so once again, I'm so sorry if this is sounding redundant, but this is about a woman who has the worst of luck. When she was 19, she was nannying for a family in LA when they all were murdered, and she's accused and goes to jail for triple homicide. Her name ends up getting exonerated. She moves back to the UK where she's from, only to 20 years later, after she's tried to make a life for herself, she stumbles upon another body. I'm not going to go into too much thoughts just because I did already talk about this on video, but I gave it a 3 out of 5 because while I really liked the past storyline when she was in LA, and you're looking at the tension and how toxic this family is that she's nannying for, I did not feel as interested in the present day, and I didn't like who she ended up becoming. I thought her character really like weakened. But at the same time, I realized it's because she literally went to prison and then was freed. I don't think anyone goes to prison falsely only to come out much more joyous in life. So, you know, I'll give her that. If you like domestic thrillers, and that's your jam, I do think it's worth a read. It's just not one that I'd probably read again or pick up. As a side note, what is it with contemporary novels doing this dual timeline, like past, present thing? I feel like every single book I've read that's been published within the past 2 years does that. Is it like a trend? Was there a memo that went out? It's not that I don't like that necessarily. It just feels weird that every single book does it. Has anybody else thought about that? Just me? Gotcha. Another 3-star read for me was Intimations by Zadie Smith. I had been hearing about Zadie Smith for a while now, and Intimations is her essay collection about the pandemic. And while I liked it, and I would even consider buying it maybe, I just wasn't as captivated by the essays as I wanted to be. I think it's because when I picked it up and on the back it really emphasizes that this is about the pandemic, and yet I don't feel like it really captured the feelings and the thoughts about the pandemic as much as I just wanted it to. If this had been marketed as just a book of essays about life, I think I would have liked it more, but because it was meant to be like this record and this reflection about this universal experience we were all feeling, it didn't hit that mark for me, which is why I ended up getting a 3 out of 5. I do think Zadie Smith is a phenomenal writer though. She does have such a beautiful way with words and really made me think about certain things in a different light, such as mental illness. So I do think it's worth the read. It's pretty short. You'll fly through it in no time. It's just, yeah, by the end I was a little bit disappointed. The last book I read that I gave a 3 stars this month was The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Thurton. This was the book club book for my local book club. I talked about it in the last video, I believe. This is kind of a fantasy-ish book. I don't know, would you consider it fantasy? A guy wakes up and he is told that he has 8 days to figure out who murdered Evelyn Hardcastle. The fantasy or the twist of this is that each day he's gonna wake up in a new person's body. And the setting is that there's a party or a masquerade at this manor on the anniversary of a death in the family. And so the day repeats over and over again. It's not that it continues, so he's kind of interacting with his future and his past selves, and that's really fun. I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5, only because while I loved the end of the book, the beginning was such a slog. I probably would have DNF'd it if I didn't have to read it. The first 200 pages just goes by really slowly, despite the fact that it's really fast paced. And I think that's because, like I said in my earlier vlog, the characters at the beginning are really unlikable and you don't know who the protagonist really is at this point. So it's kind of hard to just read through people that are awful. But to be fair, everybody in this book is awful. There's really no great people. The ending though is really good. So I would recommend this for people who are willing to read kind of a thick book where most of the reward comes from the ending itself. Now moving on to our 4-star books, there are 2. The first one was The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. This every book I keep saying, I've talked about this in a vlog because I just didn't really read that much. So when I was reading, I was vlogging. But this is a book about witches, and the mythology is that there are different types of witches that are tied to different seasons, and during those seasons their powers are really activated, and there is a little bit of matching between personality and season, but during the other seasons their powers are less because, you know, the stars aren't aligned for them. You have Clara though, who is an Ever Witch, which means that she can activate any season, so she is the special one. And like any person with great power and great responsibility, she doesn't want it. She wants nothing to do with this power. She doesn't appreciate magic the way that others seem to be. And so the book is kind of a coming of age story, or coming to terms with oneself, or self-discovery. There is a little bit of romance. What I really liked about The Nature of Witches is its depiction of weather and the seasons and what they kind of symbolize for people. I also really enjoyed the fact that the conflict came from climate change or human influence on the earth, and while some may have been dismayed by that because it's kind of a political stance, I really enjoyed that aspect, having these witches who are in tune with nature, whose power comes from nature, and how their purpose really is to create balance, but you have this group of other people who don't have a connection to the earth, really destroying it or just changing its power, and how the witches have to respond to that. I will say that the book is very surface level almost. The writing's very distant. So when I was reading it, it really reminded me of those old YA books from like the 80s and 90s, like Elizabeth Chandler or L.J. Smith, where the writing was removed. There wasn't a lot of reflection on what the characters were feeling or what they were thinking. It was more plot based. I think the main criticism I've read from The Nature of Witches is that they just wanted more. They wanted more to the story and more to Clara to really understand. They didn't think that she was given enough conflict or really fleshed out enough for them to care. And I think that's completely justified. That is a, I get you, I hear you, I see you, and I believe you. It's just I grew up on books like that. So for me, the writing was almost nostalgic, and I just didn't mind it at all. The last book I gave a 4-star this month was Anxious People by Frederick Backman. This is an author that I've seen everywhere. I feel like he has a cult following. People either love his books or they have no idea who he is. It kind of reminds me of the whole like Colleen Hoover fan base. What are they called? They call themselves something. I can't remember. This was my first book by him, and I'm not gonna lie, the first few chapters I could not get into it. His writing style is very unique, and he has a very conversational tone in his writing, which I'm very on the edge about. When I say conversational, I mean he brings up the reader, you know, like you think of this, or you might think that I'm this, and kind of goes on these rants. Like there's pages where it's just solid paragraphs in the book, which is daunting when you're just trying to get through the book. But once I got used to his writing style, I really liked the book. Anxious People is about a would-be robber, because is it still a bank robber if they never actually robbed a bank? You don't know. But in an escape, they end up taking an apartment showing hostage. So you have this random collection of people who've all just come to look at this apartment that really don't have any connections to each other, but all of a sudden are taken hostage, and they're having to talk to each other, and the story kind of switches back and forth between them, digging deep into their backstories, what drew them to that day, why did the bank robber become a bank robber. You start seeing that there actually may be similarities and connections between the characters more than you thought initially. And this is a purely character-driven story. So while Natures of Witches, I would say, is more plot-driven, there is zero plot in Anxious People except for what I just told you, because most of the book is just them in the room talking with each other and looking at their backstories. I ended up loving all of the characters. I have seen some people who just thought all of them were unlikable. And if that's the case, I'm sorry, but I had a lot of empathy for them. I thought Backman did a really good job of making even the most unlikable characters lovable. For example, there's this old white guy who's just an old white guy. And by the end, I liked the old white guy, which, do we need more of that in the world? I don't know, but it was still an adorable book. So I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5. I will keep reading his books, or at least when I give it another go. One of my friends recommended A Man Called Ove, so I got that book, and I will let you know how I think about it. Maybe I'll read it in November. Okay, the last book I read was my 1 5-star this month, and that was The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. So I've been reading through James Baldwin this year. I just got done with Giovanni's Room not too long ago, and this is his essay, or I guess a collection of essays, since there's technically 2 essays. One, a letter to his nephew, and then another that's the bulk of the book. And oh my word, was this collection just so good. I started reading it, and every page I was just highlighting. I mean, like virtually highlighting, because I was reading it on my Kindle, but just highlighting every word, because James Baldwin is so eloquent and so smart, empathetic, yet straightforward and blunt, and is not unafraid to call out what he feels. And this book's kind of a reflection about how he's felt as a black man that's been discriminated against, and how he operates in the world, and what he's done to understand his identity, both as a black man, also as a gay man. And honestly, it took my breath away. I can't recommend it enough. I liked Giovanni's Room a lot. It is a fiction story, so these are inherently kind of different types of books, but The Fire Next Time made me realize why James Baldwin is so acclaimed, because it's so rightly deserved. I mean, I think like the worst part about this is this was published in 1963, and yet it is so applicable to today. It was just disheartening and awful, but I think such an important read. It was a 5 of 5, easy give. Just take all my stars and do with them what you want. Those are the books I read this month. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to be posting my November TBR next week. This is actually my 1 month of YouTubing, so thank you for following along if you have. I wanted to be posting a video every week, and I have been, so that's pretty exciting. I hope you had a great October. I hope you have a great November, and I will see you next time.